sing together this morning. You're seated on the throne of mercy. Your glory shining bright for all to see. Oh God, I will praise you. Magnificent with grace unending. You rescue us with love that never fails. Oh God, I will praise you. Who is like the Lord, strong in battle? Who is like the Lord, mighty to save? Who is like the Lord, King forever? Jesus reigns, Jesus reigns. Come on, we believe that today. I know that you are always with me. Your presence goes before and goes behind. Oh God, I will praise you. Who is like the Lord, strong in battle? Who is like the Lord, mighty to save? Who is like the Lord, King forever? Jesus reigns, Jesus reigns. Who is like the Lord, strong in battle? Who is like the Lord, mighty to save? Who is like the Lord, King forever? Jesus reigns, Jesus reigns. In our world, in our city, in our homes, you reign in all the earth, you reign in all the heavens. You're holy. You're seated on the throne. Nothing can stand against you, Lord. You reign in all the earth. You reign in all the heavens. You're holy. You're seated on the throne. Nothing can stand against you, Lord. Who is like the Lord, strong in battle? Who is like the Lord, mighty to save? Who is like the Lord, King forever? Jesus reigns, Jesus reigns. Who is like the Lord, strong in battle? Who is like the Lord, mighty to save? Who is like the Lord, King forever? Jesus reigns, Jesus reigns. You reign in all the earth, you reign in all the heavens. You're holy. You're seated on the throne. Nothing can stand against you, Lord. You reign. You reign in all the earth. You reign in all the heavens. You're holy. You're seated on the throne. Nothing can stand against you,
That's right, he reigns. Well, good morning, Anchor Lincoln. We are so excited that you are worshiping with us on our third preview gathering. Let's continue in worship. How much we praise, how much we love him. Let's declare that this morning.
It's a real simple song. It says, Lord, I love you, I adore you, and with my whole heart, I will bless you, oh God. Lord, I love you, I adore you, and with my whole heart, I will bless you. Come on, let's raise it up. Lord, I love you, I adore you, with my whole heart, I will bless you. Lord, I love you, I adore you, with my whole heart, I will bless you. So we sing hallelujah, hallelujah, hallelujah. Come on, let's go back to the top. Say, Lord, Lord, I love you, I adore you, with my whole heart, I will bless you. Lord, I love you, I adore you, with my whole heart, I will bless you. Say, Lord, I love you, Lord, I love you, I adore you, with Let's just sing it together. Hallelujah. Come on. Hallelujah. Hallelujah. Raise it up and say
Hey guys, my name is Kari and this is my husband.
Hola chicos, mi nombre es Sammy.
We're Anchor Group leaders here and a part of the core team, and we're so excited that you could be here to worship with us today. One of the ways that we like to stay connected is by following our social media on all of our platforms.
Y les animamos a hacer lo mismo, invitando a sus amigos, vecinos, familiares, para que estén siempre conectados.
If you follow some social media, you've probably already heard, but we have exciting news. After months of praying, God has opened the door for us to have a physical location in the Lincoln District. That's where we'll be meeting for our Anchor Core Team gatherings and our preview gatherings.
Y estamos muy emocionados de verlos en persona y poder hablar juntos otra vez.
As core team members, one of the ways that we love to partner with Anchor is financially, and we love to encourage you to do the same. It's super easy. All you have to do
Es ir a la página web anchortacoma.org o mandar mensaje de texto al número que ves en pantalla.
Next up, we're going to hear Pastor Matt teaching on hospitality and what it looks like to create space for others practically.
Así que agarra tu café, tu desayuno, tu Biblia y tus notas.
See you next time.
Good morning, Anchor Lincoln. We are so stoked. This is our third ever preview gathering. We started off our preview gatherings talking about our vision as Anchor Lincoln. We want to be a community of imperfect Jesus followers living for the good of Tacoma and the greater South Sound. And we followed that up at our second preview gathering by talking about the first of our 4 core values, hope, and how we want to be a people of hope that give hope, spread hope in the Lincoln District and the surrounding area. And today we're going to be talking about our second core value, which I believe is the vehicle for us actually being a people of hope, giving hope, and living out our vision to bless the Lincoln District and the surrounding area. And that is the core value of hospitality. Now, maybe when you think of hospitality, you think of how our culture defines hospitality as entertaining. Typically, this manifests in us getting our Pinterest boards all set up and ready to go for that evening's dinner party where we dress the table up. We dress ourselves up in that one fit that we know looks good, that we get compliments on. And we turn on the music, we get the drinks, we prepare that one meal that we actually know how to cook. And we flex on the people that come. Really, our entertainment oftentimes really just manifests as us trying to flex, us trying to stunt what we've got and how perfect we are, how we've got everything in line. So typically, hospitality, as our culture knows it, really it's about us, how we look, what's our image like. And the thing is, that's not the hospitality we're talking about. We're not talking about entertaining. We're talking about something so much more. See, entertaining is focused on the self, but the hospitality, kingdom hospitality, we're talking about here is focused on the other. The Greek word for hospitality in the New Testament is phileo, and this word is a combination of 2 words, one being brotherly love and the other being a stranger. And so quite literally, phileo means to be a lover of strangers. I think about a time years ago when me and 3 other of my friends traveled to Nepal, Kathmandu, Nepal, to do some ministry in the slums. And the thing about it is we actually had no idea where we were going to stay. We were on the plane to Kathmandu, landing in Kathmandu, having no idea where we were going to stay, just believing that God will provide through his church. And he did. I'm not saying that's a model that you should put into practice, just flying somewhere, believing somebody in God's church will take you in. But for us, it worked out. And a family took us in, this group of zealous, passionate Christians from America coming into Nepal trying to change the world. They took us in, they fed us, they encouraged us, they put up with us. They actually turned out to be like family to us. I actually look back to the last picture we took with this family. We were all kind of huddled up, not 6 feet apart, but cuddled up, and it looked like we were a little family. Some alternate Brady Bunch type. This is a picture of phileo nixia. Hospitality at its finest. A loving of strangers, foreigners, people who are different. But the thing is kingdom hospitality, it doesn't stop there. It doesn't stop in the hosting of people, in the caring for people around the dinner table. It actually goes past that. And we know it goes past that because we see Jesus taking phileo nixia out of the house and into the world, out of the living room into the barbershop, out of the dining room into the coffee shop, out of the backyard into the public square. Phileo nixia is more than just the practice of bringing people into your home. It's providing a presence. It's providing space. It's creating space for the other. You know, to create space for the other is something that comes easy when the other looks like us, talks like us, walks like us, watches the same stuff on Netflix and Hulu like us, listens to the same music as us. It's easy to sign up for that type of hospitality. But that's the type of hospitality that creates nothing more than societal Christian compounds or Christian social clubs where we all just click up. Turn on the worship music up loud, turn on Pure Flix or whatever, and just stay in our bubble till kingdom come. But that's not the hospitality we're actually challenged to pursue in light of Jesus' life and ministry. He actually challenges us to create space for those that would actually press against our normal preferences and dividing lines. And so right now, we're just going to take the next 10 to 15 minutes to look at 3 circumstances, 3 scenarios where Jesus creates space for the other. 3 challenges for us as Anchor Lincoln as we seek to value hospitality and practice creating space. And the first is this story of Jesus and Peter. Luke chapter 5, verse 8 through 11, we see Jesus interacting with what would soon be his disciple, one of his disciples, Peter. Jesus, he was teaching on the shore, he was teaching, and there were some boats on the water, and he crawls into one of the boats after he was done teaching, and Peter was in the boat, and he says, hey, Peter, why don't you and your guys cast a net over there in the deep end and see what happens? To which Peter responds, bro, with all due respect, we've already done that. We already threw the nets out there all day actually, and there was no fish to catch. But he says, trust me, do it. So Peter, he humors Jesus and throws the net out. And much to his surprise, the net came back so full it was about to burst. Peter, in that moment, understands, I'm in the presence of a non-ordinary human. I'm in the presence of someone great. And listen to how Peter responds to what just happened. When Simon Peter saw this, he fell at Jesus' knees and said, go away from me, Lord, I am a sinful man. He recognized that he was in the presence of something divine, something great. And really appropriately, he says, Lord, go away from me. You don't know what I did last night. You don't know how I talked to my parents. You don't know how, my business practices. You don't know what I do when I'm up late scrolling on my tablet. You don't know, Jesus. I am imperfect. Go away. I find it interesting as I talk with people about the hurdles and the walls between them and God. Typically, it's not as much of an intellectual conundrum or a past experience in the church, although those are prevalent. But a lot of times it comes down to people understanding and recognizing their own imperfection and brokenness. And they use that subconsciously to say, I'm not ready to be before God because I'm not whole. I need to be perfect before I step foot in that church, before I step foot in that anchor group, before I step foot in community, before I give God a shot. That's where the whole, the church would burn down if I walked in there, or the walls would start shaking. And I promise you, if that was the case, Anchor Lincoln would be burned down by now. Jesus, he doesn't call us to be perfect before we come to him. He invites us in. He creates space. He creates space for us in our imperfect and broken states because he's the only one that can make us whole. He's the only one that can perfect us. Without him, we can't do it on our own. I remember sitting with a friend of mine about a year ago, and we were talking about what was holding him back. And this is the exact thing that was holding him back. He believed a lie that said that he had to be perfect to come to God. He viewed God as this angry God who was more of a taskmaster than anything, and that would hold him to a higher standard than he could ever achieve. And as we talked through it, I pointed to some passages of Scripture, some interactions like this one in Luke chapter 5 of Jesus bringing the imperfect close into his space. And something clicked in my friend. He realized that he didn't have to be perfect to come to God, but God was the only one that could make him perfect, and that God's grace was sufficient to cover his sins and was inviting him into his fold. This is such a common false notion that we have to be perfect before we come to God. And in our hospitality, in our creating space for the imperfect, we do war against that false notion, that lie. Because when we create space for people who are imperfect, as imperfect Jesus followers ourselves, we give space for them to interact with the one who says, don't be afraid. I'm going to make you a fisher of men. Don't be afraid. I have a vision, a purpose, a plan, a direction for your life that is greater than you could ever imagine. And don't worry, my grace is sufficient. This is the interaction. This is the response of Jesus to us as the imperfect people, and he invites us in. So, because of that, in light of that, Anchor Lincoln, we are challenged to express that type of phileo-nixia, that type of hospitality. A type of hospitality that would bring the imperfect person, people in, knowing that we ourselves are imperfect Jesus followers, recognizing that we are prone to imperfection, yet God's grace is sufficient. We want to be known as a community that makes space for the imperfect. The second picture of hospitality we see, the second picture of creating space that we see in Luke chapter 5 is in verses 12 through 13. The scene is there's a leper, and lepers in ancient Israel in the time of the New Testament, and way before then actually, is that they are a community that is pushed to the margins, pushed to the fringes of society. They are the outcast. They have to eat, breathe, and sleep their uncleanliness, their unworthiness. Whenever they walk around people who are ceremonial clean, they have to yell, unclean, unclean, unclean. They are pushed to the fringes. They eat, breathe, and sleep their uncleanliness, their unworthiness. And this leper, he probably heard this story, the rumors of this rabbi who was performing miraculous deeds and healing people, and he was probably on his last leg when it came to hope. And so he traveled from his enclave, from his community on the fringes of society to Jesus, beelines to Jesus. I imagine he had his hood up, he had his hands covered, his rotting flesh covered, and he beelines to Jesus. And you got to believe Jesus had a crowd around him, people around him, but he had hope in this Jesus. And listen to this interaction Jesus has with this outcast. Listen to this interaction Jesus has with this leper. Verse 12, it reads, while Jesus was in one of the towns, a man came along who was covered with leprosy. When he saw Jesus, he fell with his face to the ground and begged him, Lord, if you are willing, you can make me clean. Listen to how Jesus responds. Jesus doesn't respond with, get away from me, you vile thing. You outcast, you leper, you're unclean. What are you doing before me, a rabbi? No, he says, Jesus reached out his hand and touched the man. I am willing, he said. Be clean. And immediately the leprosy left him. You can imagine that this was likely the first time in years that a clean hand touched him, that he felt the embrace of somebody else who didn't have leprosy. And Jesus responds, I am willing. This is Jesus' response to the outcast. This is Jesus' response as he makes space, as he creates space close enough to touch. Not just on Twitter, not just on Facebook, not just on Instagram, talking about the outcast, the marginalized, those on the fringes, those who have been cast aside. No, close enough to touch. I am willing. There are people in our society, in our communities, who have been treated as lepers, who haven't had to verbally yell out, unclean, unclean, but they think it as they enter into society, as they enter into their workplace or the streets of Lincoln District or wherever in society. They think unclean, 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 because they know that when people see them, they see something unclean. They see an outcast. And by Jesus' example, as a church, we are called to those people, not as projects. Don't hear projects, but people who have infinite value and worth as people made in the image of God. This is our opportunity to show phileo nixia, to create space for these communities. At Anchor Lincoln, that's what we want to do. We want to create space for the outcast, the marginalized, the oppressed, those on the fringes, those who have been cast aside. Why? Because we see Jesus doing just that. We want to disregard the dividing lines of the in and the out, the who's who, who's in, who's out. We want to tear down those dividing lines to create space. I just want to give you permission. 5 years from now, Lord willing, Anchor Lincoln takes off. We hit weekly gatherings. We hit our goals. We launch all that. Everything's going well. If 5 years from now or a year from now or 2 years, whenever this comes to fruition, and we're on track, if you come into our space, if you come into our community and you don't see an outcast, or you don't see those who have been marginalized, those who have been pushed on the fringes, if you only see clean people, I need you to come talk to me. I don't want to be a part of that. I personally don't want to be a part of a church who doesn't make space for the outcast. Because if that's the case, we're just a comfortable Christian country club. And it's a waste of a life. It's a waste of a community. I don't want to just profess space for the outcast. I want to live that out, close enough to touch, because that's our example in Jesus. So that's, as Anchor Lincoln, we create space for the outcast like Jesus did. The third and final scene that we see Jesus creating space in is one that I find to be the most challenging. When we think of Jesus kicking it with the imperfect. We think of Jesus kicking it with the outcast. But the hardest pill for us to swallow, at least for me, when it comes to who Jesus challenges us to create space for. It's the unpopular. Jesus, he comes to Levi, the tax collector, in verse 27. A tax collector was someone in ancient Israel who was in bed with the oppressor, Rome, who was making money off his own people and the oppression of his own people. Tax collectors were some of the most unpopular and most hated communities in his day. And Jesus, he goes to Levi. You may know him as Matthew. He's one of the disciples. He said, "Follow me." He said, "Follow me," to Levi the tax collector. He brings him in. He makes space for him. And what does Levi go on to do? In the following verses, Levi goes on to throw a fat daddy party, a rager, a kickback for Jesus, a banquet for Jesus with all his tax collector cronies and friends. And the religious elite of the time would look in on this party and say, "Why are you kicking it with these sinners, these tax collectors and sinners?" And Jesus responds with something so powerful. He responds with saying, "I didn't come for the sick. I didn't come for the healthy. I didn't come for the healthy. I didn't come for those who have it all together, who are put together, the power. I didn't come for that. I came for the sick. I came for those who are struggling. I didn't come for those who think they have it all together." This is the picture we have of Jesus making space for the unpopular. And this is so hard for us, especially in the midst of our culture that seeks to cancel the unpopular, that seeks to cancel those who don't vote like us or who don't believe the same things we believe about every little thing. It's so easy for us to buy into this frame of mind and this perspective. And I have to tell you right now, this is not the way of Jesus to cancel people just because they don't see eye to eye with us. That's not the way of Jesus. And we see that here exemplified in how Jesus reacts to Levi and the tax collectors. He makes space for the unpopular. He makes space from those who culture hates, the people, the masses hate. He makes space for them. It reminds me of this story, this powerful story of this woman. Her name is Rosaria Butterfield. She has this testimony of in the 80s and the 90s, she was a lesbian feminist. She hated the church. And she was an English professor at Syracuse University. And one of her works at the time was writing this book, essentially asking the question of why does the church hate me and my people so much? Why does the church oppress the LGBTQ plus community along with women? Why do they hate us? She was under this impression that the church just hated her and her community. And so she writes this editorial, this article, and posts it in a large newspaper. And she, much to her surprise, receives a letter from a pastor, a local pastor of a Presbyterian church, inviting her over to share a meal with him and his wife. She looks at it as an opportunity to further research Christians and their Bible. And so she says, "Yes, I'll come." And she has a great time, the first time that she goes over to share a meal with them. And so she decides to keep coming back. And over the process of years, she would continue to have dinner with this pastor and his wife. And she would ask questions, real questions about the Bible, about their belief. And over the process of years, she finds the hope, the beauty of Jesus, as Jesus beckoned her to come and follow him. And what led to this? What led to her experience the transforming love of Jesus wasn't the table layout. It wasn't the fresh baked bread. It wasn't the cocktails or the music. It wasn't the ambiance or the vibe or the energy, whatever you want to say. It was this pastor and his wife creating space for Rosaria to be Rosaria, to be herself, to ask the questions that were on her heart, to let her know that she didn't have to put on a facade when she walked through the door. She didn't have to fake anything. that they weren't going to judge her for where she was at, but to create a space, an environment for her to be her and to ask her questions. Now she's married to a Presbyterian pastor, and her husband, their whole ministry is hospitality, to where almost every night they'll have 10 to 30 people come into their home, Christians and non-Christians, neighbors and people who live far off, to share a meal with them, because she was impacted so heavily by this pastor's hospitality. As I envision Anchor Lincoln and where we're headed, as I pray for Anchor Lincoln in our future, I pray for stories like this. I pray for Rosaria Butterfield's stories. Stories of us showing hospitality and creating space for those who are unpopular. So much so to where the religious elite of our time would say, why are you kicking it with them? Why are you kicking it with those sinners? I find that kind of pushback indication that we're on the right path. We're hanging out with the right type of people. The people who are far from God, who are unpopular in our culture or unpopular to us. And this doesn't just, this extends to your family members who say crazy things about politics. It extends to your friends or the people who you stare away from, who don't see eye to eye to you. This extends to the unpopular. It extends to the people that we don't necessarily want to hang out with, because we see Jesus doing just that. He didn't allow culture to define the people he hung around. He created space for the unpopular. He created space for the outcast. And he created space for the imperfect, because he understood that they had intrinsic value and worth. As image bearers, people made in the image of God, he created space for them to encounter him and to respond to him saying, don't be afraid. To respond to him saying, I am willing. To respond to him saying, follow me. And we do this. We value hospitality because Jesus did, expressed in the way that he was made an outcast. He was made imperfect by taking on our sins on his shoulders. He was made unpopular so that we might be brought into the fold and perfected. That's why we value hospitality so much, is because we've experienced Jesus making space for us. We have come to him with leprosy. We have come to him with withered hand. We have come to him understanding our imperfections and our shortcomings and our unworthiness and our brokenness. We have come to him knowing that we are unpopular, knowing that there's no way we should be in the presence of Jesus, no way we should be in the presence of something so good and so divine. And his response has been, I am willing. He has created space for us. He has laid his hand on our unclean shoulders and given us space. He has made space for us, not created space from us. And we mimic that. We would be doing him a great disservice. We'd be doing the world a great disservice if we didn't. As a church, that's my prayer, is that we would respond to Jesus's hospitality in our own lives by providing hospitality to the Lincoln District and the surrounding area and the world around us. Because there are people who are far from God, who are just waiting for our hospitality, waiting for that space to encounter the one who seeks to make them whole. That is one on offer for you today. If you have yet to say yes because you feel your imperfections or your brokenness or your uncleanliness or whatever is holding you back from God right here, right now, Jesus is making space for you. He's making space for you. And I just want to encourage you, if you haven't already, to respond to his words. To not be afraid and to follow him. And if that's you, I want to encourage you to comment below or send us an email. Send me a personal email, matthew@anchortacoma.org. I would love to talk to you about this. This is a big deal. And we should respond right now, and as we take communion, as we remember and reflect on his body being broken for us, his blood being shed for us, so that we may be made perfected and brought into the fold, into his space. We respond in light of that by being hospitable ourselves. I just want to encourage you, as you take communion, to consider what are the ways that you can create space for the people who are different than you, the people who don't look like you, the people who are far from you, the way you view things. What does it look like for you to take a step in making space for them?
everything we need. Now that you are here, we give everything we have. Now that you are here, we have everything.